working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. And today I'm being joined by our EBC Vietnam Bureau's Ralph. Hello, Ralph.
Hello, I'm Ralph Mando Pempai from your EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
With Myanmar.
New Zealand announced the suspension of high-level military and political contacts with Myanmar, the first major international move to isolate the country's ruling junta following a coup.
Minister Mahuta is also to
The military rulers who seized power in Myanmar insisted military rule would be different this time, as martial law was declared across swathes of the country after massive protests against the new junta.
President Duterte on Monday said he will not allow the National Telecommunications Commission to grant ABS-CBN permit to operate, even if the broadcast giant gets fresh franchise from Congress. The president said ABS-CBN should settle first their unpaid taxes.
Well, ilang tulog na lang mga kaibigan at darating na po ang unang batch ng ating bakuna sa kanila. Pero samantalang hindi pa po dumarating at dahil may panahon pong hindi pa tayo lahat ay mapakilaan, kinakailangan po ang magandaan tayo sa loob ng mga pribalong sakyan.
The Philippines is ready to start its COVID-19 vaccination by mid-February. First to New Zealand, where the country announced the suspension of high-level military and political contacts with Myanmar, the first major international move to isolate the country's ruling junta following a coup, unveiling
military leaders. I think every New Zealander would be devastated to see, after years of working so hard to build
Democracy Party, ending a decade of civilian rule. Prime Minister Ardern said New Zealand wanted the UN Human Rights Council to hold a special session to discuss developments in Myanmar. She added that New Zealand's aid programs in Myanmar, worth about 42 million New Zealand dollars, that's about 30.5 million US dollars a year, would continue with safeguards that they did not benefit or come under the control of the military junta.
Number 4 po. Now, the United States has since led global calls for the generals to relinquish power. State Department spokesman Ned Price also called on China, the historic partner of Myanmar's military, to join major democracies in condemning the coup.
I think more broadly, when it comes to what we've seen in recent days and recent hours, it is fair to say that we stand with the duly elected representatives of the people of Burma in their efforts to speak for the people of the country. We join them in demanding the immediate and full restoration of the democratically elected government. We stand with the people of Burma, support their right to assemble peacefully, including to protest peacefully in support of the democratically elected government, and the right to freedom of expression, including the freedom to seek, to receive, to impart information both online and offline. We're, of course, very concerned about the military's recent announcement restricting public gatherings. We have been encouraging China, both privately and in public, to condemn this action, to join the international community, to join the United States and those other countries, a large swath of the world that has spoken out in no uncertain terms to condemn this anti-democratic action. And to that end, I would point you to the statement that came out of the UN Security Council last week. It did have some strong language. Of course, China did not stand in the way of that, but we continue to believe that the Chinese need to further condemn what has taken place in Burma in recent days. So I'm going to speak for the Department of State. I will say that shortly after the events of February 1st, we made an effort to reach out to Aung San Suu Kyi. We did that both informally and we did that formally as well. Those requests, of course, were denied.
President Joe Biden has threatened new sanctions against Myanmar unless the military regime relinquishes power. Dozens of other members of her Democracy Party were detained, ended a decade of partial civilian rule in Myanmar, and triggered international condemnation.
The military rulers who seized power in Myanmar insisted that military rule would be different this time, as martial law was declared across swathes of the country after massive protests against the new junta. New junta chief General Min Aung Hlaing made his first televised speech since seizing power, insisting the putsch was justified by voter fraud. He also echoed previous military insistence that the power grab was in line with the Constitution, but declared that this time things would be different from the Army's previous 49-year reign, which ended in 2011. Let's listen in.
COVID-19 အကြောင်းပြုပြီးကြိုတင်ဆန္ဒမဲပေးခြင်းတွေကိုကြီးညာခြင်းအမျိုးမျိုးထုတ်ပြီးဆောင်ရွက်ခဲ့တာတွေတရားမျှတတဲ့မဲဆွယ်စည်းရုံးခွင့်များရှိခဲ့တာတွေဟာရွေးကောက်ပွဲမတိုင်မီကတည်းကအငင်းပွားစာတွေဒီလိုတွေ့ရှိချက်တွေမဲတမမှုတွေစင်းတွေအတွက်သက်ဆိုင်ရာတာဝန်ရှိသူများကိုစစ်စစ်မေးမြန်းနေရှိနေပါတယ်ရေပေါ်ကာလဆိုင်ရာပြဋ္ဌာန်းချက်များနဲ့အညီဆောင်ရွက်ပြီးစီးပြလို့ရှိရင်ဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေ2008ခုနှစ်နဲ့အညီလွတ်လပ်ပြီးတရားမျှတတဲ့ပါတီစုံဒီမိုကရေစီထူထောင်ရွေးကောက်ပွဲကိုပြန်လည်ကျင်းပပြီးအနိုင်ရတဲ့ပါတီကိုဒီမိုကရေစီစံချိန်စံနှုန်းများနဲ့အညီနိုင်ငံတော်တာဝန်ကိုလွှဲအပ်နိုင်ရေးဆက်လက်ဆောင်ရွက်သွားရန်ဖြစ်ပါတယ်။တိုင်းတိုင်းပြည်သူလူထုတရားလုံးစိတ်ခံစားမှုတဲ့ပဂရိအချက်လက်များအမှန်တရားများကိုရှေ့ရှုပြီးလက်တွဲညီဆောင်ရွက်သွားကြပါစို့လို့မြစ်တာရက်ခတိုက်တွန်းလိုပါတယ်။အားလုံးကိုကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်။
The general also said the country welcomed foreign investment and also announced lifting of coronavirus restrictions, including reopening schools and Buddhist pagodas. He added that Rohingya refugees who fled to Bangladesh during a 2017 crisis will continue to be repatriated to Rakhine State. The junta proclaimed a one-year state of emergency last week, promising to hold fresh elections after that without offering any precise time frame. Meanwhile, protesters started rallying across Myanmar's largest city of Yangon today, defying warnings from the military threatening action against large gatherings. Since the junta staged a coup on February 1 and ousted Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi from power, waves of dissent have swept the country, with hundreds of thousands amassing in major cities. By Monday, the military issued a stern warning on state TV, vowing to take action against offenses that disturb, prevent, and destroy the state's stability. Curfews and a ban on gatherings were also announced for hotspot areas across the country, including Yangon, Sanchong, and Kamayut townships, the main spots where protesters converged in recent days. But in Sanchong township, about 200 teachers defied the orders on Tuesday, carrying banners saying, "We are teachers, we want justice," and waving a three-fingered salute, a gesture borrowed from pro-democracy movements across Asia. Across town, another group gathered in front of the headquarters of Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy Party. Wearing red and LED colors, the protesters carried Suu Kyi's portraits and chanted for the military to free her. Despite a tarnished reputation in the West for her handling of the Rohingya crisis, Suu Kyi remains an immensely popular figure in the country, with her party sweeping more than 80% of the votes in November's election. Britain and the European Union requested that the United Nations Human Rights Council hold a special session in response to the ongoing political crisis in Myanmar. The call comes after a week after Myanmar's generals conducted a coup in the country. Let's listen in. We'll be back with more news right after this break.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Mga orihinal na musikang Pilipino.
Mga paborito nating singers.
Mga kompositor sa likod ng magaganda nating awitin.
Mga mahuhusay nating Pinoy artists and performers.
Ito ang programang nagbibigay pugay sa talento at musikang sanlibutan.
I get to touching you. It's you. I've been waiting for so long. I'm in love. I think I'm in love. Na minsan ang minahal.
Ito ang Himig ng Lahi.
Welcome back to the program. Now, the relatives of an Australian economic advisor to Myanmar's deposed civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi say they are distraught over his detention in the wake of a military coup. Macquarie University professor Sean Turnell was the first foreign national confirmed arrested by the new military junta, which took power last week after detaining Suu Kyi and other senior members of her National League for Democracy. In a statement released by Australia's Foreign Affairs Department late Monday, the family said they were distraught that Turnell had been detained. I quote, "He is a practical economist who has and will always use his expertise and experience for a good cause," unquote, the statement said. And I quote, "Myanmar is a country with which he has fallen in love, and through working on and for it for more than 2 decades, he brought jobs, investment, and hope to many of the poorest people there without thought of reward or concern for his own advantage," unquote. His wife, who posted the same message to Facebook, called for Turnell's immediate release. Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne said Monday that the government would continue to press strongly for Turnell's release after she summoned the Myanmar ambassador over the case. She said the country was deeply concerned about the situation in Myanmar and was providing consular assistance to a number of Australians.
In other news, President Duterte on Monday said he will not allow the National Telecommunications Commission to grant ABS-CBN permit to operate even if the broadcast giant gets fresh franchise from Congress. President Duterte said ABS-CBN should settle first their unpaid taxes.
Ang Congress is planning to restore the franchise of the lobbies. Wala akong problema doon kung i-restore ninyo. But if you say that if they can operate, kung may ano na sila, no, I will not allow them. I will not allow the NTC to grant them the permit to operate. Kung ibigay ninyo yung franchise because it is within your power to do it, go ahead. Alam mo bakit? Unless and until mabayaran ng mga Lopez ang taxes nila, I will ignore your franchise and I will not give them the license to operate. Kalokohan yan. Parang binigyan mo sila ng price for their being for committing criminal acts. Ito yung pinagbili ng Lopez, yung Lopez of Companies kasi maraming utang. So binili nila na lahat, pati yung mga utang pinagbili ng Lopez doon sa DBP. Meron akong kulang dito because I am not quite familiar. Ito lang ang akin eh. Pero ito dumating sa akin and I said in my official capacity as a government worker. Ngayon, pinagbili ng Lopez doon sa DBP. Binili ng DBP. Tapos, merong batas, SPAV. Yung SPAV is a law that was made to help ailing banking institutions. Aywan ko, ito bangko ito, pero napabili nila ang kanilang utang lahat doon sa DBP. But after a few years, binili ng DBP uli yung pinagbili nila. Pinagbili nila sa DBP yung pinagbili nila. This time, medyo wala na yung mga utang-utang. Condoned, kung ano-ano ang nilagay nila. Ngayon, unless it is clear, I think Congress, I understand, started an investigation, but stopped nung dumating na sila dito kay Lopez. There were so many investigations about banking, except that pagdating sa kila Lopez, hinuwinto sila. Dumating sa akin ito in official capacity. Ang gawa ko lang nito is, I think, I'll pass it on to the Ombudsman. Para sa akin, ang Ombudsman ang pinaka-independent body na mag-solve nito. Gusto ko lang magbigay sa kanila kasi pera ito ng tao. It's the government money that is involved.
On January 5, Deputy Speaker Vilma Santos Recto filed House Bill number 8298, seeking to renew for another 25 years ABS-CBN's legislative franchise. To recall, Congress was unable to renew the network's congressional franchise before its expiration date on May 4 last year. ABS-CBN, upon the directive of the NTC's shutdown order, ceased its broadcast operations on May 5, 2020. The previous House hearings have exhaustively discussed the network's franchise issues, including the citizenship of ABS-CBN Chair Emeritus Gabby Lopez, the possible violation of the constitutional limits on foreign ownership, reported labor and tax violations, and other violations of the terms of its legislative franchise. The NTC on June 30, 2020 also issued 2 cease and desist orders directing ABS-CBN to halt the operation of its digital television transmission using Ankara Broadcasting Corp's Channel 43 and the direct-to-home satellite transmission of its cable firm Sky Cable Corp.
A French nuclear attack submarine was among 2 Navy ships that recently conducted a patrol through the South China Sea. Its defense minister announced in a move likely to anger Beijing, which claims most of the strategic waters as its territory. The SNA Emerald was accompanied by support ship BSAM seen for the passage, Defense Minister Florence Parly said on Twitter late Monday. I quote in a statement, "This extraordinary patrol has just completed a passage in the South China Sea, a striking proof of the capacity of our French Navy to deploy far away and for a long time together with our Australian, American, and Japanese strategic partners," unquote. She tweeted along with a picture of the 2 vessels at sea. China lays claim to nearly all of the South China Sea, while Taiwan, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, and Vietnam also claim parts of the region, believed to hold valuable oil and gas deposits. U.S. warships occasionally carry out freedom of navigation missions through or close to waters claimed by Beijing to stress Washington's rejection of those claims. The USS Johns McCain last week sailed near islands in the South China Sea, claimed by Beijing, and conducted a transit through the Taiwan Strait, prompting a warning from China. NATO member France has exclusive economic zones in the Pacific around its overseas territories and has stressed the importance of defending freedom of navigation in the region.
In other news, the crew of a South Korean tanker seized by Iran are still on board the ship, according to Seoul, despite Tehran announcing earlier this week it would release them in a humanitarian move. Now, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps seized the Hankook Kemi and arrested its multinational crew of 20 sailors near the strategic Strait of Hormuz on January 4, saying it had polluted the waters. The development came as Tehran urged Seoul to release billions of dollars of Iranian assets frozen in South Korea due to U.S. sanctions. On Tuesday, Iran's foreign ministry said the crew of the seized tanker had been granted permission to leave the country in a humanitarian move, although it would retain the vessel and its captain. South Korean reports say the partial release complicates the situation as the ship needs personnel present to maintain it. The arrested crew were from South Korea, Indonesia, Myanmar, and Vietnam.
Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
Turuan din natin ang mga bata ng tamang paghugas ng mga kamay. Basain ang kamay ng tubig at lagyan ng sabon. Kuskusin ang iyong mga palad. Gayon din ang pagitan ng mga daliri. Pati na ang likod ng mga palad at daliri. ganun din ang iyong hinlalaki, kasama ang mga dulo ng iyong mga daliri. Pagkatapos ay iyong palapulsuhan. Gawin ito ng kahit 20 segundo. Pagkatapos ay banlawan ng tubig at patuyuin.
Welcome back to the program. Now, China delivered 600,000 doses of its Sinopharm coronavirus vaccine to ally Cambodia on Sunday, making the kingdom the latest country to use Chinese jabs, despite concerns about their efficacy compared to Western alternatives. Cambodian leader Hun Sen announced last month that China would donate 1 million doses of its coronavirus vaccine to the kingdom, which will cover 500,000 people because 2 doses are required.
Vaccine Sinopharm របស់ចិនរបស់មិត្តចិនដែលត្រូវបានផ្ដល់មកកម្ពុជានេះគឺជាប្រភេទវ៉ាក់សាំងដែលត្រូវបានទទួលស្គាល់ថាជាវ៉ាក់សាំងមួយដែលមានសុវត្ថិភាពនិងមានប្រសិទ្ធភាពសម្រាប់ស្រទាប់មនុស្សអាយុពី18ឆ្នាំដល់59ឆ្នាំហើយត្រូវបានបញ្ជាទិញព្រមទាំងអនុម័តឲ្យប្រើប្រាស់ដោយប្រទេសជាច្រើននៅក្នុងតំបន់និងលើសកលលោកក្នុងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជានិងខ្លួនក្នុងនាមខ្លួនខ្ញុំតបខ្ញុំសូមសម្ដែងអំណរគុណជាថ្មីម្ដងទៀតជូនដល់រដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងប្រជាជនចិនចំពោះជំនួយវ៉ាក់សាំង1លានដូសតាមរយៈក្រសួងការពារជាតិជូនដល់កងទ័ពនិងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាក្នុងឱកាសចូលឆ្នាំចិនដែលឈានមកដល់ក្នុងពេលឆាប់ខាងមុខនេះខ្ញុំសូមតាំងនាមរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលនិងប្រជាជនកម្ពុជាជូនពរដល់ប្រជាជនចិនសូមទទួលបានជោគជ័យក្នុងការងារនិងវិវលភាពចម្រើនរុងរឿង
On Sunday, the strongman premier greeted the arrival of the first batch at Phnom Penh International Airport. It's unclear when the remaining doses are scheduled to touch down. The first people to get the jobs include frontline health workers, teachers, soldiers, the premiers, bodyguards, and officials around the king, the premier said. Cambodia plans to vaccinate at least 10 million of its 16 million population with shots from both China's Sinopharm and Sinovac, as well as the Swedish AstraZeneca. Cambodia has long been a staunch ally of Beijing, receiving billions of dollars in soft loans and investments. While many countries reacted early in the pandemic by closing borders to Chinese travelers, Hun Sen refused to follow suit and even traveled to Beijing to meet with leader Xi Jinping in a show of solidarity. Cambodia has weathered the pandemic relatively unscathed, registering only 474 cases with no deaths, though experts say the low numbers are likely due to a lack of testing.
President Duterte appealed to the Communist Party of the Philippines, or CPP, and its armed wing, the New People's Army, or NPA, to guarantee the unhampered and safe transport of COVID-19 vaccines throughout the country. The president also asked the CPP and NPA not to intercept the vaccines and to observe the rules of humanity because, quote, that vaccine is for the Filipino people. Let's listen in.
I'm appealing. I am appealing to the Communist Party of the Philippines, yung pinaka-umbrella I don't consider yung mga NDF pati NPA. The Communist Party of the Philippines must guarantee that the vaccines in the course of their being transported to areas where are no city health officers or medical persons, na huwag ninyong galawin ang medisina. Allow the vaccines to be transported freely and safely. I am asking you now to observe that rule because that is for the Filipino people. As I have said, the money belongs to the Filipino people. The credit goes to no one. Sa inyo ito, mga taong Pilipino, pera ninyo ito.
In the same meeting, National Policy Against COVID-19 and Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez Jr. said the military and the police will help in securing the delivery of the vaccines.
In his virtual presser on Monday, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the Philippines is 100% ready for the COVID-19 vaccination drive. The first batch of the vaccines that will be coming from drug makers Pfizer, BioNTech, and AstraZeneca under the sealed agreement with the COVAX facility would arrive in mid-February.
Well, ilang tulog na lang mga kaibigan at darating na po ang unang batch ng ating bakuna. Sa katunayan, ready or not ready, handang-handa po ang ating gobyerno para magsimula ang ating vaccination drive itong 15 ng Pebrero. Pero samantalang hindi pa po dumarating at dahil may panahon pong lilipas bago tayo lahat ay mabakunahan, kinakailangan po habang nag-aantay, mask, hugas, iwas. Naku po, ngayong nandito ng bakuna, ngayon pa ba tayo magpapahawa sa COVID-19? Kaugnay nito, base sa desisyon ng IATF, inanunsyo na po ng Department of Health at Department of Transportation ang guidelines sa pagsusuot ng face mask sa loob ng mga pribadong sasakyan. Dahil nga po nagkaroon ng kaunting kaguluhan dun sa ilang anunsyo na ginawa po ng ibang opisyales, no, lilinawin ko po. Kapag kayo po ay nagbabiyaheng mag-isa sa sasakyan, po pwedeng tanggalin po ang face mask. Pero pag meron kayong kasama sa sasakyan, talagang required po na magsuot ng face mask kahit na sila ay mula po sa iisang pamamahay.
According to National Policy Against COVID-19 Chief Implementer Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., some 117,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines produced by Pfizer Pharmaceutical Company will be the first to arrive, and these will be delivered in one tranche. It would be followed by the arrival of around 5,500,000 to 9,290,400 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines to be delivered on the first and second quarter of this year, he added.
In other news, Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc on Monday allowed localities in Vietnam to impose strong measures, including social distancing, to effectively contain the spread of the coronavirus. The government chief spoke highly of the efforts made by the health sector of Vietnam, competent forces, and local authorities in deploying drastic and creative measures to control COVID-19 outbreaks in the northern provinces of Hai Duong and Quang Ninh. However, another cluster has been reported in Ho Chi Minh City, the country's biggest economic locomotive, with 28 cases as of 3 p.m. on Monday. Given the situation, Prime Minister Phuc asked HCMC authorities to stay calm and to take drastic actions to contain the outbreak, while encouraging residents to follow the Ministry of Health's 5K, meaning in Vietnamese, Khao Trang, face mask, disinfection and distance, Kong to tap no gathering Kai Bao Ite health declaration. He welcomed the decision made by HCMC and Hanoi administrations to cancel fireworks shows on the upcoming Lunar New Year's Eve to limit crowds. The Prime Minister also called on localities to encourage workers, including business owners, to refrain from traveling during the Lunar New Year holiday in a bid to help prevent the spread of the pandemic.
Thailand's Ministry of Public Health is pledging to have 30 million Thais vaccinated against COVID-19 by the end of the year. Dr. Office Kawin Pong, Chief of the Department of Disease Control, or DDC, said, and I quote, "This is the largest vaccination program in our history, and we need to get all our staff ready to do the job," unquote. The FDA last month already approved the COVID-19 vaccine developed by Oxford University. AstraZeneca, the first 200,000 doses should arrive this month and will be given to people in high-risk areas, especially Samut Sakhon province, the epicenter of the recent infection outbreak. It is envisaged that 20,000 doses of the initial batch will be administered to frontline health workers. The remaining doses will be given to high-risk groups in Samut Sakhon, including those aged over 60. Patients with non-communicable diseases and vulnerable groups. Dr. Office was confident 50% of the population would be vaccinated this year and said the injections would be performed at thousands of public and community hospitals.
Bored na po ako mag-judge. Kailangan ko lang, Kuya John, hanapin yung sarili ko.
Pero, teka, ano ba problema?
Hindi ako dapat dito.
Isang ka ba dapat?
Basta, dito gusto ko eh. Mas masarap pa rin makipaglaro sa mga bata.
Hindi kayo nang kapadyan, talo ka na mag-isa.
Magtrabaho ka nga. Yeah, susunod na naman ang masarap na kaingan. Susunod na naman ang masama... Ano daw?
Because you've asked for more, we're giving you more! It's time to have fun tuwing hapunan dahil regular nating makakasalo ang bouncing baby wonder na si Boopsie Wonderland sa It's Singing Time! From Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. only on Net 25.
Foreign investors flocked to Myanmar as it began its democratic transition a decade ago. But this week's military coup could accelerate a trend of Western withdrawal and China's expansion. On the streets of Yangon and Naypyidaw, worries are growing over the economy, which had already been hit by the pandemic.
နိုင်ငံတကာပိတ်ဆို့မှုတွေဖြစ်ကောင်းဖြစ်လာနိုင်တယ်ဖြစ်ဖို့လည်းအလားအလာရှိပါတယ်အဲ့တော့ပို့ပြီးတော့ပြည်သူလူထုအနေနဲ့ကိုဗစ်ကာလလည်းကြုံခဲ့တဲ့စာဝတ်နေတဲ့အခက်အခဲဖြစ်ခဲ့တဲ့အခုဒီလိုမျိုးအာဏာသိမ်းလိုက်တဲ့အပေါ်မှာလည်းစီးပွားရေးပိတ်ဆို့မှုတွေဖြစ်လာမယ်ဆိုရင်ပြည်သူလူထုတွေကခါးသီးပြီးခံမှာပြည်သူလူထုပဲသူတို့စီမှာတော့ဒီတော့သူလည်းတားတဲ့မြေကစားလို့မကုန်ဘူးလို့အခုတော့သိရတယ်လေ
ဟိုကအမှားဖြစ်ရင်ကုန်းပေါ်ကမပုတ်နိုင်ဘူးနော်မပုတ်နိုင်အလုပ်ကန်ကတော်တော်လေးကိုပြဿနာအခုလက်ရှိတော့မှအလုပ်လက်မဲ့တွေကများနေဟုတ်ဒီစီးပွားရေးကတော်တော်ကြီးကိုတော်တော်ဆွဲတင်ရမှာပေါ့နော်အခုတော့မှတော်တော်များတယ်ပိတ်တဲ့ဆက်ရုံတွေအများကြီး အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်မလို့အလားအလာကတော့တိတ်မမြင်ဘူး
Myanmar's untapped potential was up for grabs in 2011 when generals in charge of a 49-year junta loosened their iron grip, paving the way for democratic reforms and economic liberalization in the country of more than 50 million people. Investors pumped money into telecommunications, infrastructure, manufacturing, and construction projects. But the buzz was already fading by 2017 for the West after a military crackdown on Rohingya Muslims in the Rakhine State led to allegations of genocide. In the coup's immediate aftermath, U.S. President Joe Biden threatened to reintroduce economic sanctions that were formally removed in 2016. Some targeted sanctions were imposed on key Myanmar military personnel over the 2017 Rohingya crisis. And as the European Union considers an economic embargo, the country's rag trade industry could be at risk. The garment sector has boomed in recent years, bolstered by scores of international brands such as H&M, Gap, and Adidas, which shifted their production to factories in Yangon's outskirts. According to Singapore-based Capital Economics, made in Myanmar clothing, footwear, and handbags make up 3% of the country's gross domestic product. But with the military back in power, a Yangon-based private sector source worries for the fate of the industry's 700,000 workers.
SoftBank Group said net profit rocketed to $11.1 billion in the third quarter as CEO Masayoshi Son taunted critics and dubbed his vision fund a goose that produces golden eggs. The telecoms firm turned tech investment behemoth said net profit for October to December hit 1,171.9 billion yen, or equivalent to $11 billion, more than 21 times higher than 55 billion yen, or $500 million, reported a year earlier. Despite the results, it said it would not provide a forecast due to numerous uncertainties affecting earnings. But the economic crisis that has accompanied the coronavirus pandemic has worked largely in SoftBank's favor, with rallies in tech stocks it owns and rising valuations for firms in its portfolio suited to the era, including food delivery. SoftBank reported a nearly $9 billion net loss in the previous full fiscal year, but has quickly returned to the black. Masahiko Ishino, an analyst at Tokai Tokyo Research Institute, said SoftBank had benefited from soaring stock markets buoyed by government stimulus to tackle the economic crisis. SoftBank has invested heavily in tech-based startups, including ride-hailing platforms in recent years, from California-based Uber to Didi Chuxing in China, Singapore's Grab, and India's Ola.
Meanwhile, equities pushed even higher in Asian trade on Tuesday following another record-breaking performance on Wall Street as vaccinations are rolled out, infections fall, and investors bet Joe Biden will be able to push through with his massive stimulus. While there's a growing sense of concern that valuations may have gone too far for now, having enjoyed a strong rally in recent months, the general mood is one of optimism that the global economy will break out as life gradually returns to normal. The president's $1.9 trillion rescue bill is winding its way through Congress, and while President Biden might not get the broad bipartisan deal he had hoped for, Democrats' majority in both houses is likely to be enough for them to pass a large package. The giant spending splurge, which includes $1,400 cash handouts, comes as the U.S. immunization program gathers pace and figures show new cases, deaths, and hospitalizations are tumbling. A similar picture is emerging in Britain, while Europe is also seeing improvements. Adding to the positivity, statistics out of Israel, which has led the world in vaccinations, appear to show the jabs are working. Now, Owanda's Edward Moya said that financial markets are forward-looking and it looks like the U.S. and Europe have COVID cases heading in the right direction, he said. All three main indexes on Wall Street ended at new highs and Asia extended the rally. Seoul led gains, jumping 1%, while Hong Kong, Tokyo, Shanghai, Singapore, Jakarta, and Manila were also well in the green. And joining us live from our EBC Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia Bureau, here is Myrna Soriano. Hello, Myrna.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
For the latest news, in relation to this year's Chinese New Year celebration, the Malaysia government will allow family reunions or gatherings of up to 15 immediate family members residing within 10 kilometers. The National Unity Ministry on Sunday, 7th of February, has announced the easing of the restrictions initially set for the upcoming celebration. The ministry said that family attendees of Chinese New Year reunions are permitted to travel a distance of within 10 kilometers of their homes. However, district or state lines crossing will not be allowed. From the previous standard operating procedures, SOP, limiting reunions to just those residing in the same household, the new SOP to allow families to gather is based on the travel restrictions of the present Movement Control Order or MCO 2.0. The ministry in the same announcement has said that the decision was made at the National Security Council technical meeting chaired by Senior Minister Ismail Sabri Yaqub, according to the report of todayonline.com. The latter source has also reported that religious activities at places of worship will be allowed on the 11th, 12th, and 19th of February. From the same announcement, it was said, unquote, places of worship are allowed to open for devotees on these 3 days from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. The number of devotees must not exceed 30 at a time. They must be wearing face masks and observe physical distancing, end of quote. Meanwhile, 24 COVID-19 deaths were reported yesterday, 8th of February. This is the highest fatalities recorded in Malaysia, raising the country's death toll to 896. According to the report of Newswire Bernama, Health Director General Tan Sri, Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah, in a Twitter post, said that 21 of deaths involved Malaysians. Dr. Nur Hisham also said that countries' COVID-19 infections now tally at 245,552 cases, including 3,100 new cases reported yesterday. He added that new cases have one imported case and the rest involve local transmissions. Selangor continues to record the highest number of daily new cases with 1,196 infections, followed by Johor with 490 and Malacca with 344 as reported by Bernama. And that's the latest news in Malaysia. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much for your update there in Kuala Lumpur. Looking forward to more updates coming out of there. Thank you very much. Stay safe, Myrna.
Thank you. Reporting live from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, this is Myrna Soriano. We'll live in interesting times.
Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI, hopes the United States will renew the generalized system of preferences granted to the country after it expired at the end of 2020. I quote in a statement, "We expect that to be renewed. All countries with GSP are expecting a renewal of the GSP," unquote. DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez said in a Viber message to reporters over the weekend. Lopez added they hope that the next GSP grant would be for another 3 years or more. He said the country will continue pushing for the inclusion of the footwear sector when the GSP grant will be renewed. The GSP is an important special trade preference program of the U.S. to beneficiary countries, as this eliminates duties on thousands of products entering the U.S. market. This also helps beneficiary countries to increase and diversify trade with the U.S. 70% of Philippine exports to the U.S. were eligible for GSP. Data from the Philippine Statistics Authority show that the U.S. is the top export destination for Philippine products in 2020.
And finally in our news, the Tasek Marimbum Heritage Park in Brunei, Darussalam, is one of ASEAN heritage parks. Let's take a look. Thank you, Ralph, for joining me today and helping me out. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again next week, or maybe this week.
Thanks to Alma. Thanks to Alma. Reporting from the ASEAN Bureau, this is Ralph Wandel, Pampai Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
And that is the latest news in the ASEAN region. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we'll live in interesting times.